Welcome to the show. We're so glad that you are tuning in from around the world, wherever you are. If you're located in the US, this month we're celebrating National Small Business Women's Month. And I'm excited to bring our guest to you today because she has done industry spanning work and has been a small business and mid sized family growing business owner herself. And today, Beth Wood chairs the Environment, Social, and Governance Committee for Principal Financial Group, as well as is its Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer. Today, we'll talk through what are those lessons learned that she had from being a business owner to bring her to where she is today in ESG, and their incredible journey as they dive into the S area, the social area, to drive purpose and profit and impact forward with their organization. The last conversation I had with Beth, we actually had a going away lunch because we had this wonderful privilege to work together. She is one of the most collaborative and creative leaders I have had the privilege to work with. And those that often ask, where did I learn collaboration? It's on this pink sheet right here. And half the notes came from lines that Beth did. And I asked her, where did you learn such collaborative phrases? And she said, it was being a business owner, scaling a business, growing revenue, sitting across from people and their livelihoods. And it was the hardest thing she ever did, but it was the most fundamental thing she ever did to help her be an incredible executive at a Fortune 500 company. So, Beth, we're going to dive in there for our audience to get to know you a little bit more. Tell us, what was a moment of being a business owner that prepared you to be an executive chairing environment, social, and governance for your organization?
Thanks, Mandy. It's wonderful to be here and it's great to see you again. Running a business is, as so many business owners know, not easy. And carrying those lessons learned from a small business environment. I had 550 employees, so not so small, but employees at all levels. Employees who were hourly workers, employees who had established their career in our small business. And it was a family business. So you also are surrounded by family members. It's not something you ever escape. So you have to learn to pivot up, down the organization and across the organization, working with all kinds of people who are motivated by very different things. And I think probably the greatest takeaway for me is know your audience. Whether that's a quick, simple water cooler kind of interaction or a more formal interaction in a large auditorium with hundreds and thousands of people in the audience. And so we find ourselves in my role today and in many of the roles of the people listening to this call. We find ourselves in various situations every single week, every single month. And so being able to be adaptable, to know your audience, to make sure you're giving your audience what they need is probably one of the greatest learnings that I ever had. Learned a lot about myself too.
I love that you talked about that transferable skills. In an earlier show, we dove into the talent gap for environment, social, and governance. And we're actually seeing more companies choose to select people who have incredible transferable skills and have the depth of experience that you have and others have, where they may not have been as familiar with environment, social, and governance. Now, Principal Financial Group was really proactive almost 5 years ago, establishing an executive committee that reported into the non-governance committee of the board. And you've been on this journey with them for the last 3 years. Tell our listeners and viewers, as somebody who's dove in with transferable skills, what have you learned over the last 3 years chairing environment, social, and governance?
Well, I'll say this, it starts with purpose. And I have been at Principal for 3 years. And I really had 3 chapters in my career. And this is the 3rd chapter. I may have 4, who knows? But when you start an ESG conversation, you first and foremost have to know why the company exists. What is our purpose? And gain alignment across the C-suite and across senior leaders in the organization so that there's very little daylight between each of us as we think about our purpose, our overarching reason for being. And some companies have done incredible work in this space. Other companies are just starting on that journey. But purpose is a foundation that feeds ESG. And so ESG is really the manifestation of purpose through strategy. So for us, our purpose is to foster a world where financial security is accessible to all. Access being a critical concept in that statement. The words for all or to all are very stressful for some people because in the financial services space, we often hold ourselves highly accountable for delivering on what our words and promises are. And purpose is really a concept. It is a never reachable idea. You are always stretching to try to continue to live your purpose. And so for us, it was about creating access to financial security for more people and businesses around the globe. And so to be authentic in that regard, we had to amplify the S, social. We felt that even though our materiality, our ESG materiality, covered things like climate change and sustainable products and cybersecurity and data privacy, the S, social, helping people live the better lives and find a brighter future, that was really authentic to who Principal is. And for me, that was probably one of the greatest learnings, was the importance of connecting your ESG strategies back to purpose, and then making sure that you action on that purpose through your ESG strategies.
As you talk about standing up for the S, the social, Principal has really driven some research forward, the Global Financial Inclusion Index. And this index was really designed to help inform your practice. First, Beth, could you tell us a little bit more about the Inclusion Index, what it is, and then we'll dive a little bit more into the insights.
Sure, of course. So the Global Financial Inclusion Index is a set of thought leadership research we worked on with the CEBR, the Center for Economic and Business Research. And Principal does business in 80 countries around the globe. This research focused on 42 countries around the globe to try to better understand financial inclusion or access to financial products, services, and programs that support individuals in their quest to plan for long-term financial security. And we have 3 pillars in the research. We researched with governments, with the financial system, and with employers to better understand the support that each of these 3 pillars provide to constituents and communities in their quest to building a brighter and better future. And what we found was that balance is really the critical element here. Singapore rated #1 around the globe because they have a very strong combination of government, financial system, and employer support. The United States rated #2, and emerging countries generally clustered at the top, developing countries generally clustering at the bottom as they find their way to building a supportive financial inclusion system. And they can learn from those emerging countries who are trying to balance the support that an individual employer provides in the workplace and that the financial system provides to constituents. So it's really a fascinating look at those 3 pillars of financial inclusion and how that helps people take advantage of policies, programs, and perks or benefits provided by their employers.
I love that that was a holistic lens around this area of social that you are standing up for. Tell us, what is something taking away from that survey that's now driving your environment, social, and governance strategy?
Yeah, our ESG strategy, this is our purpose in action, right? And our ESG strategy, this is a way for us to live the S, social, and our commitment to financial inclusion. And so the thought leadership research now will be available to anyone who wants to access it. And we've had a number of other companies, of governments, folks in the United Nations who are really diving into the research to better understand how to support countries around the globe, how to give insights to employers as they take a look at their programs, their benefits offering to support their employees, and what the role is that they play in the context of those 3 pillars. So it's It's research that we sponsored and we expect to sponsor for a very long time, but we're inviting everyone. Think about UNSDG number 17, right? Thinking about partnerships. We are better together as a society, a global society, than we are apart. So how do we all leverage this research in order to make better choices about how we develop programs and policies for the future?
What wonderful insight and a way to use, like we talked about in a previous episode, your ESG superpower. I think investors are expecting this more of companies to focus in on their area of expertise and for us to think about it more holistically, not just in philanthropic or foundation ways, but also what's the value that you are adding to create a more equitable world. In your case, it might be finance. In my case at Workiva, it might be the digital divide. Where are we creating access? And it doesn't necessarily always mean programs. It's also thoughtful research that can move us forward. So thank you and Principal for your work on moving the needle around access and how we all can get better at it. Beth, tell us, as you talked a little bit about the E and the G influencing the S, tell us more about that.
So here's a great example that I carry with me often, and I try to remember this when I think about social and financial accessibility in the social space. When we have environmental disasters, when we have floods or hurricanes, the setback that it creates for those people who suffer that environmental disaster is really incredible, especially when it comes to women, single parents, and people of color. And they struggle to recover from a natural disaster. And so, as we think about helping to preserve our environment and manage our carbon footprint, we have to think about the downstream impact that dramatic environmental change can have on people's social and financial condition.
Thinking about that from the business perspective, we're going to have Peter Land on the show, who comes from Dick's Sporting Goods, similar to you, an executive chairing ESG for his
Right.
company. And we talk a lot on the show that when you make the decision to take a stand, and ES or G, wherever you may fall in this case, S, it's like any other business decision. You have risk, you have opportunity, and you have cost. So, what have you found as you've created focus in the S has been a risk, an opportunity, and a cost?
Yeah. So I often say, and this may be on your little pink piece of paper there, I often say brands are not only what you stand for, but also what you stand up for. And I think those two things have to work together. Brands who are making a promise to their customers, but haven't really interrogated their value system, run the risk of overlooking an opportunity to attract more customers to their franchise. I believe there's a recent stat I was quoting. I believe it's from Edelman and their trust barometer, and it basically says 64% of people around the globe choose brands based on that they're doing good in the world and their alignment with their value system. And so you can have all the greatest features and communicate the most incredible benefits in the world, but the risk, if you don't communicate what you stand up for, anywhere in your communication repertoire, you run the risk that people will choose someone else who had a voice, who stood up and said, we stand for this, our values are as such, and we're going to stand behind that. And we're actually going to put research and investment behind advancing these ideals and these goals for people in the planet around the globe.
It's a beautiful way to think about it because you may have a small loss, right, as you move forward. And we heard that with Professor George Serafim earlier in an episode right before, where he said, look, profit and purpose come together, but it doesn't come at no cost. There is cost. And you may choose, one of the biggest pieces in our colleagues who are working in the manufacturing field or energy field is the current investment of cost in green infrastructure and how they're trying to move forward. But there's a cost, and it's a cost of trying to think ahead to where the market and the business is going to go, the consumers, the regulation. And I love that you brought it up that, you can't have this light shining through the executive team where they're not coming together and really thinking about it collectively as they work together. As we think ahead, many are preparing for Q4 board meeting, Q1 kickoff. How should your colleagues be thinking of the year ahead?
Yeah, the year ahead's going to be very interesting. I don't think anybody can predict what's in front of us. So just as 2 years ago, I don't think anybody could have predicted what we've been through as a global community in the last 2 years. I think first and foremost, it's be clear and aligned on who you are and why you exist, because that informs the strategic choices you make as you move forward in your strategy. And when you make those strategic choices, while it's really hard to stay true sometimes to your purpose because bottom line profits can take over and short term thinking can take over, we're all subject to that. But if you keep your eye on the long term prize and stay true to who you are, I think that over time that plays out. That's been my experience. That 64% number I quoted is for all cohorts. When you go down to younger cohorts, to your point about where the puck is going, it rises well over 70% for alpha generation and millennials. So this next generation of consumers, they're looking for authenticity. They're looking for brands and companies that align with their values and can help them live the lives they want to live. And they choose brands that are equal. They'll even pay more for brands that have a soul, if you will. And so I think as we move into the fourth quarter, the first quarter of 2023, it's going to be a daunting time. My three biggest pieces of advice are: be focused. This is not a time to try to be all things to all people. Know who your customers are, know what their drivers of consideration are, and stay true to that. Two, be aligned on your purpose and know why you exist and what you're here to do in the world. And number three, balance people, planet, and profits. It's not an either or, it's an and you have to think about all three in connection to one another.
Beth, what a joy to be together again. Thank you so much. Well, listeners, it's hard to believe that we are closing out pretty soon season one and already preparing based on demand season two. So if you have ideas or topics that you would like us to cover, please feel free to send us your thoughts on Twitter at ESG Talk or LinkedIn. We'd be happy to connect with you because you are co-producers. You are the ones that drive the direction of the show, and we want to kick it off next year, meeting the needs that you have as we tackle all things environment, social, and governance. We'll talk real soon.